Hey guys, so after the last podcast or voice docu that I did on vampires, legends, theories, and truth, I wanted to actually do a segment just on CountSt.Germain, simply because I've done more research on this guy and I found a lot of more information on him. And it's so much information I have on CountSt.Germain and so much investigation that I've done online that it will take probably one segment to get through it all. So I want to start off with the fact that his origin, I know I said in the last segment that his origin is unknown, where he came from, but there is one person who I believe is credible. I've researched this woman, and to me she's quite credible, and I will tell you why. This woman wrote a book called The CountSt.Germain, The Secret of Kings. Now, this book is on, obviously, Saint Germain. And in her book, she claims that the Count was born as the son of Prince Francis Rákóczi. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Rákóczi II, who was Prince of Transylvania in 1690. Now, this author of this book, claiming CountSt.Germain's birthplace and birth parent, is Annie Besant. And she's not an anonymous or someone who do you think could write a bunch of nonsense and publish it. No. This woman is actually pretty credible, and which is why I believe there's a possibility that he was the son of Prince Francis Rákóczi II. I'm going to start off with the beginning of her life. Now, 1870, this is around the time she got married to a reverend, which is where she picked up the last name Besant. She had a son, but eventually the family life, it wasn't the family life, but the Christian teachings were not fulfilling her. So she leaves her family and searches for a deeper truth of life. She begins to study science at London University, and she did encounter a lot of sexism, and I mean, I would assume so at that time, any woman did. It's late 1800s. She became a free thinker and involved herself in radical movements. She published free thought books, and she was very diligent and had strong beliefs. I believe this woman felt that she had a mission from early on, and it was strong enough. It was a strong enough belief that she eventually had to leave her son and her husband in order to pursue this. Now, her daughter was taken away by the reverend, her husband, due to the unconventional lifestyle that she was living. And what I mean by unconventional lifestyle, it's in regards to the fact that she was a free thinker, and at that time, people who did not think according to what was deemed conventional in society at that time were seen as outcasts or people who were looked down upon, and they weren't regarded highly in society. And despite all this, and despite the fact that she was a woman, she continued to pursue this belief. Now, she became prominent in social labor movements in many societies. When I was investigating her, there's so many societies to name that she was a part of. She was basically a humanist. She also delved into the occult. She was into spiritualism, hypnotism, and during her time, after she graduated from London University, she had an epiphany which led her into theosophy. And this was after meeting an author from a book she read. I don't remember the title of the book. But after she met this author and interviewed this author, and read this book, she decided to go into theosophy. Now, if many of you aren't familiar with theosophy, it is similar to, it has something to do with philosophy, but it is more focused on the truths of life and the true meaning behind life. And it's a different way of thinking, a more intellectual way of thinking. Now, she believed that in order to battle the evils and the root of the world, theosophy was the answer. She later became second president of the Theosophical Society. Now, that's really impressive. She traveled to India and other places, establishing humanist movements, winning medals, and inspiring women. She was always politically active. So this woman was someone who anyone could admire, especially at that time, a female rising in society that way and in prominence at a time where women were looked down upon, or not looked down upon, but didn't have power and rights as much as men did. And for her to, you know, overcome all these obstacles, and it's amazing. She's definitely an intellectual, and there's definitely more to her. She also knew Gandhi. She admired him, but she disagreed with the fact that he went against the law to pursue one's beliefs. That was it was part of his mantra, to pursue your beliefs no matter what. And she disagreed because she believed that disobeying the law could bring consequences and dangers. She mostly believed in utilizing conventional constitutional methods to achieve political reform, which I agree with. You know, I think if there's a way to accomplish something without having to stir chaos or to cause, you know, disagreement and hatred within a community or, you know, groups of people, I believe that that solution is better off. And I think pride should also be not be a part of your pursuit towards what you believe in. Pride actually can cause a lot of chaos. Now, that's just my point of view of this. So I really agree with her way of thinking. Also, she was known to be a clairvoyant. So they believe she had yogic powers. Yogic, I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, yogic or yogic. It's a Hindu practice of spiritual insight and tranquility. So there's a lot of meditation involved, and it's more about finding one's spirit and being able to see the meaning behind things that average person cannot see. It's something about humbling your spirit and being able to see, basically being enlightened. It's similar to Buddhism, if some of you are familiar with Buddhism, and it has a lot to do with enlightenment, and there's a lot of meditation involved. Now, she also published a book called Occult Chemistry, which she spoke a lot about. She co-published this book with someone else called C.W. Leadbeater, I believe his last name is. They co-wrote this book together, and it went in depth with chemistry and atoms and very specific. And it was actually supported by a leading physicist in the mid-1900s. So it's a credible book. Now, I also did some research on the prince that she believed Count Saint-Germain was the son of. And it doesn't mention anything about him having a son with any name related to Germain or, you know, Saint-Germain. He had two sons, Joseph and Georgi, and the prince was Hungarian originally. He had a wife, which she had the two sons with, but it says that it was most likely probable that he had an illegitimate son before, but there's no mention of this illegitimate son. I don't find any information, and to be honest, sometimes I would assume sometimes back then if someone had an illegitimate son, they would probably not acknowledge him, and the kid would most likely never even meet his father, and would probably have, you know, a name that the mother gave him, or whoever took this kid in after the abandonment of his father. And so it's possible that he did have an illegitimate son who he did not want to recognize and acknowledge, and the kid went by without knowing who his father was, or maybe he did. Now that I basically gave you guys a summary of Annie Besant, as you can see, this woman was someone who anyone could admire. She was an intellectual. She knew about chemistry. She was a free thinker. She published books. She traveled to India, establishing foundations to help the needy in India at that time, and children, and inspired women. And she went against all the odds as a woman in her time. And she also had a perspective on life that I believe was much more, I mean, I'm not someone like Gandhi, or, you know, to say this, but I believe that based on what they said her perspective was compared to Gandhi's, I believe hers was more, it's more rational. And so basically this woman, to me, a book by her saying that Count St.Germain was son of a prince of Transylvania, you know, I actually think it could be possible now, because there is no reason for me to believe that this woman would make up something. You know, she is someone who is beyond her years. I believe she's an old soul, and she's, according to the information, obviously, about all the accomplishments that she did in her life, I believe she is not someone who you think would make up, you know, something for absolutely no reason. She was someone who is beyond the minds of many of people nowadays, and someone like her wouldn't make up information like that. She must have gotten it from somewhere, and I'm not saying it's accurate, but I believe there is a possibility that Count St.Germain was the son of the Prince of Transylvania. Now, I want to touch base on Count St.Germain. Last segment I said he spoke 6 different languages. Well, in actuality, this guy spoke 12 different languages. 12. I know, insane. Especially at that time, like I said before. He was well-rounded with history, science, and philosophy. He was skilled with the jeweler's craft. So he went to, I believe, Persia to study the craft of jewelers, which explains why he had jewels all over his clothing and his shoes. It was also said that he knew how to double the size of a pearl. Now, in 1760 was when the whole rumor of him being an immortal started. And it started over this woman called Countess von Georgi. Now, this wasn't exactly when it started, but when people started calling him an immortal. But before that, people would comment and say, whoever saw him throughout the years would say, oh my God, he never ages. He looks the same. Now, in 1760, this was when the immortality rumor was born. Countess von Georgi overheard a supposed Count St.Germain that had arrived to meet Madame de Pompadour, which was the mistress of King Louis. I believe King Louis was it King Louis VIII? No. King Louis of France at that time in 1760. Now, she instantly, you know, she hears this guy named Count St.Germain that has arrived to France, and she becomes intrigued because she had met Count St.Germain while in Venice in 1710. When she went to greet him, this is what I found during my investigation. When she went to greet him, she was left baffled by his preserved appearance. Like, this dude had not aged And from 1710 to 1760, that's 50 years. For someone not to age in 50 years, obviously there's something supernatural or something obscure is going on. Now, she asked him if perhaps it was his father she had known in Venice. And his response was, "No, madame, but I myself was living in Venice at the end of the last and the beginning of this century. I had the honor to pay you court then." So he's claiming it was him she had seen in 1710 and not anyone else. Now, she replied to him, "Forgive me, that is impossible." So, I mean, I would think the same thing. I would think he's either playing a joke or it's his dad. I don't know. But I would be completely confused if a guy in 50 years had not aged since I saw him 50 years ago. Now, she said, this was her response: "The Count I knew in those days was at least 45 years old, and you at the outside are that age at present." His response to her was, "Madame, I am very old." She replied, "But then you must be nearly 100 years old." And he responded to her, "That is not impossible." Now, if in fact this guy was immortal, or whatever obscure, phenomena was going on with this guy, I don't understand why he would release such information to people. If it was me, I'd say, well, I use a bunch of creams, and, I would try to hide the fact that, there's something obscure going on, and to have rumors starting to spread about me being an immortal. But anyway, so he said it's not impossible for him to be nearly 100 years old. And then he went on to provide her with details only he could have known from their previous meet in 1710. Now, after this, the next 40 years, he traveled. And there's so much that I can't touch base on because it's years after years of people saying, and people like kings, dukes, ambassadors, generals, people, royals, saying that they keep seeing this guy throughout the years and he has not aged. He has not aged. This guy looks the same. It's so many people. There's a lot. There's more than 20 people that were claiming to have seen him. There's too many people to name and too many instances to touch base on. But I will continue. He also played the violin impressively. He was also a successful painter. And everywhere he went and traveled, he established alchemy labs. He had no bank accounts, and some people speculate that maybe it's because since he was into alchemy, he knew how to turn base metals into gold, and perhaps that is how he had money. And like I said in the previous segment, he never ate, and according to him, he was on a diet of oatmeal. I highly doubt that was his diet. I'm pretty sure it was something else. People say that these are just rumors, that he was part of the Rosicrucian Order, the Order of the Templars, Society of Asiatic Brothers. Now, these are secret societies, and most of you know what secret societies are. But the one that I believe he was probably a part of is the Freemasons. Now, I'm not one who enjoys talking about secret societies for the main reasons of all the dangers that people have said, regarding these things, but during my investigation, I realized that there have been too many dates, too many instances where he has been seen in congregations of the Freemasons or in meetings or Bohemian Grove even. Bohemian Grove is, I don't like talking about this, but it's a secret place where they meet in California, supposedly, to do their rituals, etc. I'm not getting into that. It's not my business. But, like I said, they speculate that there's too much information also as well, stating that he has been seen in meetings with Freemason meetings. Now, two famous people that are known in history, Casanova and Voltaire, knew him as well. The fact that I already mentioned in the previous segment, he composed the music. He was a classical music composer, and his music is actually available in the British Museum today. So Count Saint-Germain was actually someone who existed. Throughout my research, I also realized a lot of people, like memoirs, have stated that Count Saint-Germain had changed his name a couple of times during his travels throughout the years. He would have an alias, I think it was 3 times he had changed his name, according to the information, the timeline that I was investigating. And that makes me think, you know, this guy, I'm not going to say, you know, my first instinct was, okay, this guy's a vampire because of, you know, the story that I discussed in the previous segment of Jacques Saint-Germain of New Orleans, which I will touch base on that case further. But this is more credible information. This guy, Count Saint-Germain, 1700s to 1800s, even early 1900s, being seen continuously under different aliases. He also sent letters to various royals predicting futures, and he also told one royal, let me tell you her name. Her name was Madame Blavatsky. So I'm assuming she was either Polish or Russian. In 1896, she claimed seeing the Count frequently, and that he was part of an ancient order of immortals in the Himalayas called Shambhala. Now, Shambhala, if you look this up, is a Sanskrit word. So Shambhala is, if you can look this up, it's an actual, well, it's a place that is either legend or actually exists. And it's a Sanskrit word. Shambhala is a Sanskrit word. And if I didn't mention, but the 12 languages that Count Saint-Germain knew, Sanskrit was one of them. Sanskrit, sorry. So that makes things even weirder. The fact that he knew this language that is not even spoken often, the fact that he knew it, and when this lady is in 1896 is saying that he was from an ancient order of immortals in Shambhala, which is a Sanskrit word, makes things very strange and quite possible. Now, this place is known as a 1,000-year-old legendary place and is known as a paradise that only certain people can visit. And according to Shambhala, the people who live there or who go there are only the ones who are able to experience the gift of immortality and never aging, etc. Now, I don't know if that's another what if, you know. It's not something that people have actually gone there and, you know, have had testimony of this place. And I mean, if this place even existed, no one would have testimony of it. It would obviously be kept secret and under lock and key. So there was also a book supposedly that the Count wrote called The Most Holy Trinosophia. Now, I haven't looked up this book. I will see what it's about. Madame Blavatsky, she claimed that he went to the Himalayas, and Count Saint-Germain actually said, he didn't say this to her, but he said this to a previous comrade of his, years previous to his last meeting with Madame Blavatsky. He said himself that he was going to disappear for 80 years into the Himalayan mountains, and that people will see him after those 80 years. My final projection on this guy is that since he was such an intellectual, well-rounded, articulate person who knew so many different subjects, and he was very fluent in 12 different languages, and he was into alchemy, and he was definitely an intelligent guy, I don't believe that he would say these things without having some sort of reason behind them. So I believe this guy definitely, especially since he delved into the occult, and the fact that the woman who, Annie Besant, who wrote the book on him, also was into the occult. I believe there was something obscure about the longevity of his life, and I think he might have been immortal. That's my final projection. But it's not that I am done with this investigation. I will still see if I find anything new or anything more credible, as well as look into the case of Jack St. Germain in New Orleans, and I will do a separate segment on that, on further investigation on that, because this segment already is long enough. So, like I said, I believe Count St.Germain was probably immortal. If not, I believe he definitely was able to lengthen his life, especially since people who know about alchemy believe that there is a specific elixir that can be made with metals and certain elements that can achieve immortality. And I believe he did actually find or discover this elixir and was able to live longer than the average human. So that's it. That's all I have to say for Count St.Germain. And if any of you want to do research on your own, I will post up the sources that I used. Just comment below and I will let you guys know any links that I use so you can make your own assumption on Count St.Germain. I guess I'll talk to you guys later.